Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you choose to read your clock, this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. With that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's early morning, middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? It took moving 1,000 miles away to finally feel comfortable enough to share this. This happened just before my senior year of high school over a 3-week period of time in the summer. I was 17 years old, drug-free. At most, I took an Advil for a headache every now and then. I just want to assure you that I was not on any mind-altering substances or long-term medication that could affect my cognitive ability. During the summer, my curfew was 11 p.m., and this occurred while driving home from my, at the time, boyfriend's house, which took roughly 15 minutes, so let's say 10:45 at night. I was full of energy at this age, and a night owl, so I was not even remotely tired. In fact, I was hyped up with the warm summer night breeze. Car windows are down, I'm singing along with the radio. I took a shortcut through the back roads to avoid going into the tiny city with the jerkish cops. Also, one of the roads I took was super straight and flat, so I could really speed, and that feels great when you're a teenager. But right before that road, I had to take 2 very close turns to get onto it. First, I'd take a right turn that was more than 90 degrees, almost back the way I had come. Then exactly a half a mile, I would turn left onto a long straight road where I could really put the gas pedal down. Since it was only a half a mile, I normally didn't speed up that much because that small stretch of road was more like packed gravel, and it would be a waste, as I would have to slow down again and turn left onto a much better road where I could really let loose. The tiny property on the inside corner of the left turn is where all of this took place. A house had recently been built there, 2 stories with a detached garage, and it seemed odd how quickly it had been erected, as we built our family house and it took us a year to finish it. I'll start at the beginning because I believe this is all related. Week 1, I am positively jamming to my music, the wind whipping through the car. It feels great, I'm relaxed in my very familiar drive home. I slow down to make my right turn onto the rough rural road, just bebopping along when my lights illuminate something stunning sitting on the corner of that road. It was a wolf, a real wolf, a solid white real wolf. I know the difference between my dog breeds and wolves. I love watching dog competitions, wildlife documentaries, and have even met a quarter wolf in person. They look very different than domestic dogs. This was a wolf, and it was amazing, and it blew my mind. I slow down even more while I turn my music down. I'm getting close to it, and I notice that it's not minding me at all. It's sitting perfectly still on that corner of the road, just staring at the house. Almost unblinking, its ears didn't even flick towards me. All of its attention was focused on this house. I was so close I could have reached out my window and brushed the fur on the back of its head and neck. I was smiling and amazed, but my mind was already churning. It made no sense for a wolf to be behaving like this, even less for there to be a white wolf in rural North Alabama in the summer. I came to a complete stop, marveling at its fur and presence. I felt euphoric, like I had seen something rare and blessed. My mind made a jump to the local Native American stories of animal spirit guardians, and I started to wonder. I can't say, though, Mom would never believe me if I told her I was late because of a spirit wolf. With a sigh, I said goodbye to the wolf and drove home in a better mood than ever. I got to see something special, and it filled me with emotions of joy and peace. Week number 2, I was driving home again, and I had been taking extra care to keep an eye out for my wolfy buddy, hoping to see him again around that area. So I drove extra slow with my window down and radio off. That was a horrible mistake. I should have realized what the presence of a guardian meant. It meant danger. Alas, I was on that short road approaching the new little house. Then I saw the thing that, to this day, makes me question my sanity, my reality, and possibly of eldritch terrors, as Lovecraft described. It was crouched right before their mailbox, its limbs folded and pulled in tight, with its haunched posture, yet its head was still taller than the mailbox. It was molded green and black with undertones of blue, and it looked wet and slimy. Its head was elongated, allowing for an extended maw full of teeth. The upper half of its body looked emaciated, with barely more than a frog-like thin skin pulled over angular long bones, ropey muscles to hold it upright, and at the end of its grossly stretched arms were equally terribly long fingers, while its legs had bulk to them and looked equipped for running, with back-facing knees for sprinting, and tipped in a raptor-like curved claw. It looked tall, maybe 7 feet, maybe more, just folded up into this predator's posture, waiting for prey. Then there were its eyes, solid black and sunken. I still want to vomit thinking about its eyes looking at me. Then I realized it's going to look at me. It's going to see me, and there is no avoiding it. Panicked terror unique to this alien thing swallowed me instantly, feeling like I was tilting off of the world I'd always known and into the abyss where monsters like this existed. I couldn't breathe, but I had to get my window up. I had to get my window up, or I would be ripped by those teeth and torn with those claws. Blood would adorn the cabin of my car, and I would become an unsolved mystery. I had manual crank windows. Oh my God. I had to crank the window because I was scared of crashing into the water and not being able to get out the car, but now I realized that there were far worse things in the world than crashing into the water. Its head was turning toward me, and I let off the gas, but I was still getting closer to it. It made me want to scream, but I had to get my window up first, and I was cranking it up as hard as I could. I was starting to cry as I finally got the window closed, and then I put the gas pedal to the floor. Gravel road be damned. I thought, I must not look at it as I pass. I must not look at it or make direct eye contact. I just shouldn't. It's not good to connect with these things. I've already seen too much. My tires had found grip, and I started to launch forward, passing it. In my peripheral vision, I could see it starting to unfold its limbs, which sent a terrible chill down my spine. I'm screwed. I'm really screwed. I'm mumbling through my tears as I slid around that turn, fishtailing for a moment before I rocketed down that road. I felt sick. My heart was hammering. I had snot and tears running down my face, and my hands were trembling. I glanced in the rearview mirror and could only see darkness, as there were no street lamps out here. I used a trick. I tapped my brake soft enough for the light to come on, but I don't actually slow down. Red lit up the dust that was billowing up from my wake. But amidst the swirling chaos, I thought I saw a darker shadow than the rest. A tall, thin shadow. I had enough and decided I was going to drive straight to the lighted road and not let off the gas again the rest of the way. No more looking back. I was going to drive 109 miles an hour, which is fast as I could go, before my governor kicked in. I even ran the stop sign at the end of the road because I was not going to get caught by this thing if I could help it. I took a right onto the highway and flew home. I might have been relieved to get pulled over, but I didn't. When I got home, my parents were not awake. I was pretty much trusted to come home on time. I called my boyfriend and cried to him for a while before I was able to explain. He was dismissive and thought I was pulling a joke on him. Then he thought I was just being crazy and seeing things. There are many reasons we didn't stay together, but his insensitivity contributed. Week number 3, I refused to take my shortcut anymore. For that reason, I'd have to leave my boyfriend's house a bit earlier. He had been making fun of me about it all week. One of the days we went to the park to walk around, and on the way back he decided he wanted to drive by the house where I saw that thing. I was hysterical, begging him not to drive there, but he wouldn't be dissuaded. So, as we got closer, I couldn't stop him. I leaned my passenger seat down all the way back, as far as it could go, cowering in panic. I hid below the window and covered my eyes, while panting heavily, reliving the traumatic night in my mind again. At one point he had stopped the car. "Spooky, you have to see this," he said. "No." I whined, resisting him pulling my arm. "No, you really have to see this. Look," he said in a changed tone of astonishment. Tears in my eyes, I uncurled and slowly peeked over the window. The house was gone, burned clear to the foundation, with only a handful of framing beams still standing. The ground around the house was blackened in a perfect large circle. My boyfriend started to get out of the car. I shouted, "No, let's just get out of here," while I grabbed his arm, but he easily avoided me and got out. He walked around the ashy piles of ruins for a while, using a stick to poke at this and that. When he finally came back, he had an intense look of thinking on his face. There was no evidence of any personal belongings, furniture, power wiring, or even interior walls. It doesn't seem like another burnt-out house. Something's weird. When we got to his house, he searched for news articles about any house fires in the area. There weren't any. He called the closest fire station and was quickly brushed off by the person that answered, as they didn't know about a fire there, and didn't have time to find out before quickly hanging up on him. I never wanted to see that place again. I went out of my way to avoid the roads in that area. Talking about it still makes my chest tighten and skin crawl and my eyes water. My brain still has trouble because I know what I saw. A thing that is nothing like any creature known to humans. Yet, I still saw it. This is near Moulton, Alabama, and it happened in the summer of 2002. This occurred while I was living in Jasper, Alabama. You can call me A. Anyway, on a summer night about 4 years ago, I had walked out onto my front porch during a thunderstorm. As I stood there, I observed this bright light burst in the yard across the street that occurred right after a lightning flash. Everything went dark in the neighborhood, apparently a result of the lightning. I observed where the light flash had occurred. I noticed a pair of bright red eyes. There seemed to be a dark form with the red eyes, but since it was night, it was hard to make out. The house and yard across the street was owned by a relative. About a minute later, there was another lightning flash, when a subsequent burst of light appeared in another area of the yard across the street. Once again, there was another pair of bright red eyes. By this time, the previous red eyes had gotten closer to me and were on the street. Not long after a second pair of eyes appeared, there was another lightning burst, a third. Then there was a third pair of bright eyes. The previous two red eyes were closer. The first was almost on my front lawn. I could make out a form of this creature. It looked like a large, dark hellhound with red eyes. Then a sudden huge creature appears out of thin air not far from the first pair of red eyes. It was gorilla-sized with long white hair, and it was on 4 legs. Its head looked like that of a wolf. By this time I'm bolting into my house and locking all the doors and grabbing my pistol. I scared the life out of my wife and child, but I was unable to tell them what I had seen because I was in shock. After a couple of minutes I peeked back out the front door, and these creatures were gone. The next day I told my brother about the previous night. My brother lives in that same neighborhood. About a year later, my wife and I separated for a few months. When I moved back into the house, my wife mentioned to me on a previous night she had heard 2 dogs barking frantically outside. As she looked out the window, she observed a huge white dog-like creature being chased by 2 dogs. She was shocked by this sight, thinking that she must have imagined it. A few nights after that, my brother, who still lives in the same neighborhood in Jasper, saw that same large white beast. He had also seen something that had a pair of bright red eyes, but was unable to get a description. The only thing I can think of is Native American spirit animals, like the first encounter had mentioned. Through the years of researching and talking with people, I've heard multiple accounts of white dog-like creatures that appear helpful to humans. Not really friendly, but not really malevolent either. So I'm not really sure. Definitely terrifying, though, if you were to witness one and not know. So, on to tonight's third encounter. I just came back from my high school reunion and chatted with my old neighbor and best friend. She said, "Do you remember that pig-faced monster we saw?" I looked at her with shock of horrible memories flooding back. I must have been so terrified I blocked it out, but yeah, I remember. We used to live on a secluded dirt road, well, in the middle of a 40-acre plot away from the road. Our property joined a huge state park at the back, 25 miles from the nearest town in Missouri. We were about 13, so it was around 2003. We were babysitting our younger siblings, so it was us and 4 younger ones. Our parents were out for the night. Obviously, we were no strangers to the woods. We knew the whole property well and would even walk the 2 miles between our houses. Free-range kids. So it's way past dark, and we have a pole light out there by the house. It's summer, so it feels great outside. We're all playing tag and hide-and-seek, just running around. I ran around the corner of my house, and I saw something white like a flash run behind a propane tank, then the well house. Our backyard was clear beside the small well house and propane tank. The woods are maybe 150 yards away, so there are not a lot of places for animals to hide. My friends saw it as well. The kids were still playing, and we thought it was a stray dog, even though this thing was crazy fast, way faster than a dog. Up until that point, we had no reason to fear anything in these woods. We did not have large predators. So we were like, oh, poor dog, let's check it out. We sprint over around the well house and see a crouched white thing. I remember its hands were long fingered hands. It was matted and dirty and smelled like death and crap. My mind couldn't quite even comprehend its face, but it had a long, kind of upturned nose, no hair on its face. It snarled like a dog pig. I don't remember its eyes, but I think they were black and yellow. All I know is they looked evil and inspired fear I hadn't known. At that moment, we screamed and ran, and this thing dashed off into the woods as I looked over my shoulder. The kids heard us scream and knew something was wrong. We screamed at them to get into the house and lock the doors. We couldn't keep our eyes off the back windows, like I didn't want to see it, but I had kids to protect, so I felt like I needed to know where it was. We were just scared and pumped with adrenaline, couldn't even speak about it. We got the kids calmed down and to bed finally. I talked with my friend and she saw the same thing as I did. Finally, my parents got home and we broke down, freaking out, crying, and pointing toward the well house. My stepdad went out with his gun. We were so adamant. They told us it was probably a feral hog and we were just tired. We didn't tell anyone at school and never brought it up again. After the reunion, I asked my brother, who was 6 years younger than me, if he remembered the night we saw a monster at Mom's old house. He said no, and I started talking about how I forgot about it until my friend brought it up, about how we saw something run behind the well house. He suddenly interrupts me, asking, was it white? And I said, yeah. He said, did it have the face like a weird dog? I nodded yes. His eyes got big and basically started yelling, oh my God, I saw that thing down the road from here a few years ago. Freaking out, visible goosebumps are on his arm. He says he was driving that dirt road with his girlfriend at the time, hauling ass like always, but on real rocky patches he would slow down and drive slowly over those rocks. He saw something in his headlights standing about 10 feet from the ditch. So he thought someone put a weird statue out there, but its eyes followed him, and its face was sweaty. It was white, muddy, had a dog-like face and long fingered hands. It stood on its hind legs, at least 6.5 feet tall. Its eyes followed him as he passed it, and he looked in the rearview mirror and saw it dash away into the trees. He asked his girlfriend if she saw it, and she just nodded. They never spoke of it again, and he never told anybody. He said he kind of blocked it out until I brought that creature up again. I did stop playing in the woods after that day in 2003. Started doing sports and teenager things. My friends stopped walking to our house and we grew apart. Now my brother and I are creeped out as hell. I think I'll call my mom sometime and talk to her about this. Today's fourth encounter. This happened years ago. I was maybe 12. My family and I went camping in a cabin by the Porcupine Mountains in the Upper Peninsula. We arrived in the evenings and my parents started to unpack everything, and as curious kids do, I wandered off, but not far. I was collecting rocks, sticks, and other stuff, and I was playing on the hill behind the cabin, and as the sun started to set, I saw an owl in the tree a couple yards away. As I was getting closer to take a look, I heard a low growl and froze. I thought it could have been a cougar or a coyote. I took a look around and didn't see anything. A couple seconds later, I heard my mom call my name, so I got brave enough to run as fast as I could down that hill and into her arms. I told her what had happened, and she shrugged it off. Shortly after, we ate hot dogs and then went into the cabin to go to sleep. My parents got a bedroom, and my aunt did as well, so I had to sleep on the couch that night. As I was trying to sleep, it started to rain, but that wasn't the only thing I heard. There was tapping, or attaching, or some sort by the window in the kitchen. I was a brave kid, so I went to check it out. I looked out the window and saw what I thought was a bear, dog, wolf, who knows, quickly run off. I could have sworn it stood on its hind legs and then disappeared into the woods. And that's not all. When I went back to lay down in fear, I heard a scream, but I don't know what it was. Who knows? It was definitely terrifying. Tonight's final encounter. My name's John, and I'm a retired federal employee who now lives in northern Nevada. This experience happened while I was living with my grandfather in a rural area of Aleppo Township in Greene County, Pennsylvania. I'm a retired Korean War vet, and I truly believe that my grandfather's actions were to protect his family. When I was a boy, my mother and I lived with my grandfather, who had a farmhouse in a rural location in southwestern PA. My grandfather was a handyman who also worked a small blacksmith shop in his barn. My grandmother had died before I was born, and my dad had also passed away serving overseas in the Army. Beginning in the summer of 1946, we noticed strange howling sounds coming from the woods that surrounded the property. The activity came at night. It was very frightening when the howling came close. The sounds didn't seem to bother my granddad, though. My mom and I were shaken up. The sounds continued off and on for about a year, but we never noticed any animals. My granddad and I would hunt for deer and squirrel in the woods during the colder months, but we never saw any signs of anything unusual. One late afternoon in the spring of '47, I was helping my granddad in his shop when I noticed something moving around the edge of the woods, near an area where my granddad had a few junk cars and other crap. It was about 200 feet from our location, but I clearly noticed someone or something moving around. I told my granddad to look. He walked to the door and lit his pipe and said nothing. After a minute or two, he turned around and went back to work. About that time, this thing moved into the woods and disappeared. I couldn't judge how big it was, but it sort of reminded me of a magazine picture I had seen of a large creature that was said to inhabit the Asian jungles. Later that evening, I told my mom what I had seen. She was shocked because she knew I would not lie to her, and that the howling sounds had been closer lately. I also told her Granddad's response when I pointed this creature out to him. She immediately stood up and walked into the sitting room in order to ask my Granddad what it was. He started to shake his head slowly and said he was hoping that we wouldn't see it because he was worried we'd be scared and leave. After assuring him that we weren't going to leave, him and my mom again insisted that he tell us what this creature was. He looked away and took a deep breath and said, "We call it the Dark Walker," and said that it has lived in the woods for many years. He said the Native Americans call it a stone spirit, and they thought that it was an evil spirit who would appear when someone was about to die. The last time he had seen the Dark Walker was the night before my grandma died. My mom was skeptical about this harbinger of death angel, but she sensed that there was something unnatural nearby. The howling continued each night, though. We hadn't seen any more signs of the creature. One warm evening, we were sitting on the back porch. There were a few howls, but they seemed like the sounds were further away. We were listening to the radio when all at once my granddad stood up and looked out toward the barn. He turned to me and said, "Johnny, go get my pistol and ammo. Now, hurry." I ran into the sitting room and grabbed the .455 Webley revolver and a handful of bullets from an old steamer trunk. I handed it to him and watched him load the gun. He then picked up a hatchet and slid it into his pant belt. "Now, both of you get in the house." We were in the kitchen looking through the screen door and watched my granddad walk slowly toward the barn. We saw him turn and walk out of sight in the darkness. I decided to grab my shotgun and keep it nearby. After a minute or so, we heard 3 gunshots and a blood-curdling scream come from the woods near the barn. Then it suddenly stopped and there was complete silence. We were frozen and wondered if we should go and look for Granddad. A few seconds later, we heard him yell, "Stay in the house until I come back." We heard the pickup truck start. I looked out toward the storage room window and saw my granddad drive to the back of the barn and park. Several minutes later, he backed up and drove by the side of the house onto the road. I could see that there was something in the back covered with a tarp. It was getting late, so my mom told me to go to bed. The next morning, I came down and sat beside my granddad, who was reading the paper and drinking a cup of coffee. Mom was sitting at the other end of the table, staring at my granddad. Not long later, she said, "Dad, tell him." My granddad put the paper down and looked at me and said I killed the Dark Walker. That was all he said. My mom told me not to tell anyone. The matter was closed. We never talked about it again. My granddad lived another 15 years, and my mom stayed with him until his dying day. When I grew older, I moved away and raised my own family. I would return home to visit each summer, and we never heard another howl again. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this early morning, middle of the night bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and honestly what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and honestly, share this information with the people you love and care about. It may just help save their lives someday. Till next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.